Hi there, this is Scott Nicholson from the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University. Welcome to the next session in the Gaming in Libraries course, and this session is all about hybrid games. Now, over the last few days, I've been talking about different types of games. I talked about analog games, which are board games and card games, things like that. And I talked about digital games, which are electronic games and computer games and console games. Today, I'm going to talk about hybrid games. Now, these hybrid games are different types of models, and they use some aspects of analog and some aspects of digital gaming. There's a lot of exploration going on about these things. And so I'm going to provide a few examples of hybrid games. This is by no means a definitive list of hybrid game types, but it's a few things that get you thinking. Now, the first type of hybrid game I'm going to talk about is a big game. Big games it's a term used for games where the players are involved in some sort of a physical space, and the players themselves are really the pieces in the game. And the players move around the space, interacting with other players and interacting with the game as they navigate this space. So, for example, there was a popular big game called Cruel to Be Kind. The way this game worked is there was an area of the city that was designed as the game place. And so anyone that wanted to play knew what the rules were, and they had to enter this area within a certain time frame and play the game. The way the game worked, it was a fairly simple game based off of the old rock, paper, scissors. That you would say something nice to someone else. You might say, tell them that they're beautiful. You might tell them, hey, look at that interesting landmark over there. Or you might welcome them. And so the way it would work is you'd go up to anyone that was in this game area and you'd say, hey, look at that great landmark over there. If they were playing the game, you just killed them. That's all it takes. Those are the three weapons you had, were saying something nice. And so if they're playing the game, they'd say, oh, you got me. If they are not playing the game, well, you just said something nice to them. This is just a friendly part of the city. And so people would start to sneak up on each other and would kill each other by saying something nice to them. Now, if I killed you, you then joined me, and the two of us traveled together. We were a team. And so it was set up so that it was a rock, paper, scissors thing. So one greeting beat another greeting, which beat another greeting, which beat the first greeting. So if I say, hey, look at that landmark over there, it might beat you telling me, hey, you're welcome. As the game went on, teams would meet each other, and when the teams met, each team would decide upon which of those three kind things they were going to say, and the other team would say one of the three kind things, and you'd use that rock, paper, scissors to decide which team won. And then the two teams would come together as one, and they would continue onward. So at the end, you had this big collision of several teams amassing upon each other, and so that's called Cruel to Be Kind. Again, it's a concept of a big game where the players are actually the pieces moving around this space. There was a big game that took place at ALA last year called California Dreamin'. And in California Dreamin', the way it worked is each player would sign up and be put on one of 5 teams representing different types of libraries. Once they were on a team, they could travel around the convention center and they would find trivia questions on boards. There'd be a question, and you'd have to solve the puzzle or solve the question, and then you would call in the answer into the headquarters. When you called in the answer, you would also tell them what team you were supporting. And then that team would get some resources. The captains of the teams could then spend the resources in order to take over parts of California. So you had a bit of a strategy going on. The goal at the end was to be on the team that got the most of California. And then the people who were the heaviest contributors to the team won some prizes. And so that's the way that the California Dreamin' works. If you want to read more about big games, here's a URL with a reading that will tell you some more about different types of big games. They're interesting things to explore for your library setting. Another type of hybrid game related to big games are alternate reality games. Now, an alternate reality game is a game where there is a story that has overlaid something going on in reality. One example of an alternate reality game was the I Love Bees alternate reality game that was done for one of the Halo games by Microsoft. It was triggered by a Halo poster which had a URL of I Love Bees on the bottom. And you could follow that URL and it would take you to a blog of a beekeeper. But the beekeeper was frustrated because there were hackers hacking into the website. Well, as you were working with the website, the hacking messages began to lead you into a much bigger story. And so the hacking led you to events that were going to go on and GPS coordinates, and as the game went on, people figured out they needed to have representatives at phone booths around the country that were represented by these GPS coordinates. And the phone booths began receiving phone calls, and each phone call gave little pieces of a message. And so only by collecting these pieces of messages and bringing them together could they figure out how to move on in the game. Now, Microsoft provided no infrastructure for players in this game. They just put the stuff out there. But the players themselves had to come up with discussion boards, how to find each other, how to work together. But by the end, they had this massive, well-organized team that was forcing the designers of I Love Bees to make the game harder and harder to try and keep up with how well the players had coordinated. And that's actually what happens with a lot of these alternate reality games, that the players are very clever, and once they start working together, they solve a game very quickly. There was a big alternate reality game for the game show Lost. There was a website that looked like a travel website, but by going into the travel website and by choosing certain types of trips and certain choices off the menus, it unlocked secret messages that led you further and further into the game. So these alternate reality games all start with a little rabbit hole. There was one of these run here in the US in an academic library called Blood on the Stacks. You can find more about that at this URL. The idea behind this is that there was an ancient Egyptian item that had gone missing, and they knew it was an inside job. This was designed for an academic library as a special program. So it was a special time when a lot of folks could come to the library and work together as a team to figure out who done it. Now, what was really clever about this one is that the whodunit, the people that were possible suspects, were library staff members. So the players had a dossier of different library staff members, so they were learning what different people in the library did. In order to figure out the clues, they had to use different types of library resources, so some print and online resources to figure out clues. As they figured out more and more clues, they got more and more pieces of information to help them figure out who done it. So by the end of this game, they figured out who was whom in the library, and they figured out a number of different library resources. Now, it all took place in the library setting, so that's this idea of alternate reality. And this is a very interesting thing to explore. I taught a class in Amsterdam recently, and while I was there, I had groups of students work with the Amsterdam Public Library and the Delft Public Library to put together alternate reality games. And so they're continuing to explore those today with the idea that a patron at any time can come and engage with this alternate reality game, which leads them on a set of clues throughout the library as they're unraveling a mystery, and it introduces them to the variety of stuff in the library and a variety of people in the library. So an alternate reality game can either be completely online, or it can be completely in the physical world, or it can be some combination. Now, another type of game akin to these is a puzzle hunt. A puzzle hunt is where you create a series of puzzles, and I've heard some libraries do Harry Potter puzzle hunts. And so the idea here is that you have, when a team signs up, they get a series of puzzles. Now these puzzles could be things like Sudokus or rebuses or simple crossword puzzles. The idea is that you want to have a variety of puzzles. And once people solve puzzles, they're able to turn those in and get more puzzles. They could turn them in either because the puzzle gives you a clue word and you solve several puzzles to get several words and you put that together to learn what the next thing you do is, or something as simple as you turn in the puzzle to a moderator, you score some points for your team, you get the next puzzle. Now, one thing that's good in this sort of a puzzle hunt is to give people a way out. Whether it's that people can get clues, but if they get clues, they lose points, so maybe the puzzle is worth 100 points. Every time you come up and ask for help, you lose 5 points out of the possible points you could get for the puzzle. So you have a way to continue. If you get stuck, you just lose points, and the winners are going to be the people who tend to do the most puzzles without adding help. You also want a time limit on these things, and you want to test them out. I've been engaged in some puzzle hunts that they thought would take 2 hours and ended up taking 6 hours for someone to work through all the puzzles. So those are neat things you can do actually in a library setting, is that type of puzzle hunt environment. Another type of hybrid game is a game show. So there's lots of game show models out there. You could take things, anything from a Jeopardy model to Deal or No Deal to Wheel of Fortune. There's lots of game show models that you could use to run a really interesting library program that could use some combination of things on a PowerPoint presentation helping you along. You'll find, actually, if you look online, or you go to, there's a website called the Trainer's Warehouse. There are computer programs to help you run game shows. You can also find some online. If you search, you'll be able to find some things that help you run or sing activities that are similar to game shows. And things like a big bingo game can work kind of like this as well, where you've got people that are engaged. It's a social activity. There's some online stuff, but it's really an event, something special that goes on. Another type of game which goes in this category, the big games, are this sort of team building and educational type large group experiences, training games. Things where you have everyone moving around in a space engaging with each other. And you could do these to either teach a lesson through a game, through some sort of team building exercise, or as just something that's fun to play, like a dodgeball. Well, okay, maybe dodgeball in the library is not the best example, but games where you're actually moving around in a space. And there's a lot of these social type of games which have people interacting with each other that could work in a library setting. There's books out there on team building exercises and ice breaking exercises, which are these large social, these big games, which can be good examples to look at. A similar category to that are live-action role-playing games. Now, I talked about role-playing games earlier, but there are live-action role-playing games where you're actually playing your character in a space. Now, there are some of these that where you run around with big padded weapons and you beat on each other in the woods, and I used to do that, actually. But those games, you are actually playing your character. But there are other types that could work for a library setting. Now, one type is there's a series of games that are called Vampire the Masquerade, where everyone is playing vampires from different clans, and it's a whole political game. But a type of game that would work in libraries is a game type called interactive fiction. Now, interactive fiction is kind of like, have you ever done that How to Host a Murder type box set or murder mysteries? In interactive fiction games, what's going on is they've developed a story. And that story, though, rather than you being told the story is broken up between a lot of different characters. So when you sign up for one of these games, you're going to get a character packet. And that character is going to tell you, you are Bob the Explorer, and you have been doing this. And here are people that you like, and here are people that you don't like, and here's your goal. Now, in these games, the way that the game plays out is you're all put into a room and you say go, and people interact with each other. I may be Bob the Explorer and I want to find Hank the Explorer because I have an old score to settle with him. And Hank might be looking for an old flame who he knows also had a romantic connection to me, and let the hilarity ensue. LARPA is the support organization for interactive literature in the United States. If you go to the website at larpaweb.org and click on the Game Bank, you'll find all sorts of free interactive literature games for you to try in your library. These can be a clever way to try something very different with gaming in your library that doesn't cost a lot of money, but gets people interacting with each other in different ways. So that wraps up this section of the class on the different types of games. What I'm trying to do is just give you a baseline so that I can talk about these types of games in the future and you've at least heard of them. But now what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of how libraries have interacted with games. I'm going to do that by telling you about different ways that libraries interact with games. I'm going to talk about the history of gaming in libraries. I'll talk a little bit about goals of gaming programs and how gaming has been supported in libraries. And that's all going to happen over the next few sessions. So if you want to talk about this content, go to this URL here and you can explore the discussions going on there. If not, I'll see you tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.